Hi there, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining me for this webinar, Confidently Present Your Qualitative Results chapter. My name is Rachel. I am a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions. We are a full service dissertation editing company, and we're here to help doctoral students at any stage of the research. So if you are struggling with topic development, we can help you out with that all the way through to your final presentation, your final, defense of your dissertation at the very end. So you will see this contact information throughout the webinar today. You can email us for more information at info@statisticsolutions.com. There's also a link as well to schedule a complimentary consultation. And so we provide that so that you can speak with one of us and we can get a chance to understand your own unique dissertation needs. You can kind of get a feel for how our company works. And so again, this information will be presented. You'll see it on each slide during the webinar and then again at the end as well. So I am joined today by Isades, who will be kind of running things in the background in case of any technical issues, but she's also putting some really helpful information into the chat right now, namely that you will receive a copy of this webinar and the slides tomorrow, I believe, but also some more information about how to schedule your complimentary consultation. And then all of our other resources on our website at statisticsolutions.com, which has recently gotten a total overhaul. And it not only looks amazing, but is very user-friendly as well. So any resources that you might need related to your dissertation, I encourage you to go to the website because we do have so many across really all possible topics, categories that you might need for your own dissertation. So again, my name is Rachel. I'm a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions. This webinar is one in a series that we do related to the dissertation. This is on presenting your results chapter. And so we do have other webinars that are available. Perhaps you have attended those before, but again, if you go onto the website, you can get yourself registered for upcoming webinars. And these are not only qualitative, but also for quantitative dissertations, as well as things like writing the literature review and the discussion chapter, the introduction, any of those aspects. So this is really a compilation of the components of a qualitative results chapter. So again, the focus here is on qualitative research in this webinar. And this is what I have seen most commonly over the years working with students. So the caveat is always, if you have any questions about what should go into a qualitative results chapter, you certainly want to consult with your school or your department's requirements or your chair. But if you really don't have a good starting point, if you get each of these sections into the chapter, you'll be in really good shape. So always default to your school, but this can be a really helpful backup. And so we will talk about all of these in turn during the webinar, kind of what each section looks like. And so this is really designed to provide you with a kind of higher level overview of what should go into that results chapter. And I should say also, if at any point you have questions during the webinar, you can go ahead and pop those into the question and answer box. And like I said, Isades is kind of behind the scenes with me today. And so she'll be able to field any questions that you have about what we do here at Statistics Solutions during the webinar. And then I will leave time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that are related to today's content. So again, questions that come up, go ahead and pop those into the question and answer box. And if they're related to what we do as a company, Isades will field those during the webinar, and I will leave time at the end to handle any other content related questions. So the sections you can see here: introduction, setting, demographics, data collection, data analysis, results, trustworthiness, and a summary. So let's take a look at the introduction first. And this is going to be really just the same as you would set up an introduction to any of your other chapters. I always like to think of holding your reader's hand as you move through the dissertation. Okay. And so at the chapter level and at the dissertation level as well. And so here you want to clearly restate the problem and the purpose of your study. And you want to do this verbatim. Everywhere that you state the problem and the purpose of your study, it needs to be word for word exactly the same. This isn't where you change things. This isn't where you get creative. Introducing different language that you think might sound creative and fun just because it's starting to get redundant can actually change. It has implications for the meaning. Words matter. And so you do want to make sure that every time you state the problem and the purpose, it's exactly the same as everywhere else in the dissertation, whether it's chapter 1 or chapter 5. You want to remind the readers of the research questions that you sought to address through your research. And you want to present an overview of the chapter, right? So we tell our readers what we're going to tell them, and we tell them what we're going to tell them before we tell them. Okay, so hold the reader's hand. There should be no surprises at any point in time. Make sure that they are with you the whole way through. So after the introduction, this is where you can get into some of the smaller sections. And these are some of the sections that are, that it may vary from school to school. Certainly the bulk of the results chapter is presenting your results. And so I have seen cases where schools don't want to see any of the setting or demographics or any of that information in the results chapter. So again, always check with your school. Okay. But, if you do use this as sort of a template or a guide, you will have everything that you need. Okay. The other thing that I like to say is that your results chapter, so in a 5-chapter dissertation, this would be your chapter 4 most typically, this is the sort of reality of what happened, because you're probably looking at this section and some of the other sections that I'll talk about in a minute and thinking, well, I already covered this in my methods chapter. Well, you probably did. Okay. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that the methods chapter is part of the proposal, but the results chapter and the discussion chapter comes later. Okay, your proposal is what you were proposing to do, the sort of in an ideal world, here's exactly how your research will go. Okay, but now you've conducted the research and you know that things didn't necessarily go according to plan. I mean, maybe they did, but they often don't. And so this is where we talk about any variations to the plan. Okay, so in the setting section, you want to talk about where you conducted the research and why. And as you're doing this, just be thinking about, what is the context that my reader needs to really understand the results? Okay, so the setting is probably pretty important. If you're conducting an educational study, it's probably important that your reader understands what the school or schools where you were working, what those were like. Okay, so where you conducted the research and why. Any conditions that influenced your research. Okay. Most everybody that's conducted research in the last year has had some kind of, well, at any point in time, but really in the last year, has had some kind of conditions that influence your research, that impact it in any way, or impacted your participants. In the middle of a pandemic, everyone's plans changed. We could no longer do face-to-face interviews, for example. And so that changed the setting a little bit. Everybody had to switch to Zoom or Skype or some other, some other data collection mechanism. So this is where you talk about any of those conditions that changed, okay, that may have had an impact on your research, your participants, and your results, your interpretation of the results. Okay, this is where you get to talk about how things change and how it might have impacted your findings. The demographics section is also really helpful, again, for providing context for the reader. This provides information, key information about your participants. And so you don't want to sort of do overkill here. You don't want to present too much information, but it's important that your readers, reviewers understand what those key characteristics of your participants were that are really helpful for understanding the results. So is it important that your readers understand that your participants were of a certain age range, for example, or that they had been working for an organization for a certain period of time? Okay, all of that is, potentially important. Ultimately, it's your sort of decision based on your own study, what makes the most sense to present. But certainly, things like gender might be important, ethnicity might be important, age, again, like I said, length of tenure in a job, all of that could be important information. Sometimes it might be helpful to sort of sketch a profile, so kind of a fuller look at who each participant is. And this can make a lot of sense. Oftentimes, maybe in a case study would be a good example of when this might be helpful. And really the key thing here in presenting demographics is just ensuring that you are maintaining the confidentiality of your participants, that you're not sharing so much information that they are identifiable to someone reading your dissertation. Oftentimes, too, demographics can be nicely presented in a table. So that's another thing to think about. The main thing that I would say with that is if you are using a table, you also still have to describe what the table presents. You also want to talk about your data collection techniques. And so again, this is a chance to, highlight if there were any deviations from what you proposed to do in your methods chapter. So you want to talk about the number of participants from whom you collected data, the location where you collected data, the frequency, was it that you conducted one interview with each participant? Or did you conduct 3 interviews with each participant? All of that information is helpful. And you want to talk a little bit about how you recorded the data as well. So was it audio? Was it audio visual? Did you take notes as well? All of this is important to include. And like I said, any variations from the plan that you presented in your methods chapter. Okay, because any of those variations, while yes, we assume that they're going to occur, they may impact the outcome or the results or the interpretation of the results. And so it's important to understand how, if anything changed, it did change. Anything unusual that happened in data collection, that's important to talk about too. Maybe your audio recorder cut out for 20 minutes or something like that. That would be really helpful to know, because that would mean that there's a 20-minute, verbatim transcript missing. You also want to talk here about your data analysis. And, when I said earlier that it is important to always default to your school's guidelines, so whatever their template or checklist says to include this, you want to ultimately follow that. Data analysis is one of those sections where I see it change a lot from school to school. So while some schools require that the data analysis section goes into the results chapter, oftentimes I see it presented in the results chapter. And so if it is split up to where in your methods chapter, you talked about your data analysis plan, and then in your results chapter, you talk about your data analysis, how it actually went. This is where you talk about how you applied your data analysis plan that you identified in your methods chapter, how you applied that to your own data, to your research. Okay, so how you analyze your data, no matter the source. Maybe you only conducted interviews, but maybe you conducted interviews and you conducted structured observations, and you also collected documents for document analysis. So this is where you describe how you analyzed your data and describe and define, if you're using a coding system, how you identified those codes, how you created them, how you cluster them or compile them into larger categories. And again, this will be unique to your data analysis plan, but this is the application of that plan to your data. Okay, so this is where you get really into the kind of nitty-gritty of how that analysis worked with your data. And you also want to identify and describe how you handled any discrepant cases or negative cases. And these are instances where there's an overarching pattern that you see emerging in the data. Well, it doesn't emerge. It's always, it's there. This is an active process, but there's a pattern in your data, and maybe a participant doesn't fit that pattern. Okay. And that would be a discrepant case. It's the sort of how did you factor that in? What did you do? We can't ignore that someone doesn't fit the pattern, okay, because it still tells us something. And so you talk here about how you handled those discrepant cases. So, like I said, those early sections are really, kind of setting up this overall context and then presenting here's how the research actually went, and here's how it was different from what was presented in the methods chapter. But the bulk of this chapter is the presentation of your results. Okay, so based on your data analysis and whatever that data analysis looked like, here's where you present the results. Okay, you can do this in different ways. And again, this is highly specific. So, you really need to think about what makes the most sense for your own study. Some students who I've worked with over the years are simply told by their, reviewers, by their chairs, this is how you're going to present it. And I would say, if that's what they tell you to do, then do it, because, they're ultimately the ones signing your graduation documents. But there are different ways to present the results. And so you can organize them based on research question. So if you have conducted a thematic analysis, just for example, and you have, say, 2 research questions and you have 4 themes, and themes 1 and 2 address research question 1, then, maybe organizing it by, okay, here's my first research question and here are the 2 themes that address it. And then I talk about the themes. And then second research question, you do the same thing. But you can also organize your results by the themes themselves, or the category. If it's not a thematic analysis, but it's maybe a different coding plan. So again, it's one of those where it depends on your own study, depends on your own research, what makes the most sense. But there are different ways to do this, and one is not better or worse than another. When you are presenting your data or your results, this is mostly going to be in narrative form. Okay, that's really the kind of key part of qualitative research, right? We're working with textual data, we're working with words, right? So most of this should be your own words, from the analysis. But what you want to do is use supporting material from participants. So supporting quotes. So, anytime you make an assertion, you want to support that. Okay, here are your findings, but here's how they're supported. This is how we know that they're based on what participants said. Okay, so you can also use excerpts from documents. Like I said, if you conducted a document analysis, you might use excerpts in the same way that you would use quotes from participants. Perhaps you did something more creative with your research and you did, something more visual, like a photo voice project. And so photographs are really important. You may include those as well as your data. Okay, to support your assertion, the creation of, these themes or categories. But really the bulk of it is going to be your own words, and you want to discuss your data. Okay, what did you find? And it says here, interpret if appropriate. And what I mean by that is usually more of the sort of interpretation discussion happens in your final chapter of the dissertation, but there are some data analysis plans, there are some research designs that are interpretive by nature, specifically interpretative phenomenological analysis is one of these. And so in those cases, there is sort of an added layer of interpretation that you would include in this chapter as you present those categories. And like I said in the beginning, you know, a good reminder is just always be thinking of holding the reader's hand. Everything should be logical and clear. Again, you know, it's not really the place to get super creative. You don't want surprises. Okay, make sure that everything is clear, logical, and makes sense. I do want to come back to this issue of discrepant or negative cases, because I mentioned this before in terms of the data analysis and the plan for how to handle these. Okay, but in the results section somewhere, and perhaps in multiple places, this is where you will talk about discrepant cases. Okay, so a discrepant case, again, is one that doesn't fit the larger pattern of data. Okay. And so we can use maybe the experience of attending a music concert. Okay. And this is, you know, very, very basic example, but let's say that you had 13 participants and you were interested in their experiences at this concert. Okay. And 12 of the participants had a really great time. Okay. And that was, you know, they enjoyed the music and they enjoyed the artist, and maybe the concessions at the arena were really good. You know, there was good food and drink and all of that. And then that 13th participant absolutely hated the experience. What do you do with that participant? This is a discrepant case. This is a negative case. Okay. It might appear that it disconfirms the overall pattern. Okay. And so you have to think about what this might be telling you. Okay. And it could provide alternate explanations. Okay. Clearly, there is some variation in this experience that, yes, while most people had a good time and they had a good time for all of these reasons, you know, this other participant did not. So there's variation that's happening. And so it's most helpful to discuss this at the category level. So it's usually not the case that, you know, the participant is so completely different from all of the other participants across every single category. Okay, it might just be one category where it was like, well, you know, this person had an overall good time at this concert, but they didn't like that, you know, there wasn't a concert t-shirt or something like that was available. Okay. And so then, you know, if that was a factor that kind of influenced people's enjoyment, and it obviously didn't do this for the participant, then you would maybe talk about it at that level of, you know, of the study of the findings. So there is also this aspect of how you might visualize the findings. Like I said, the bulk of this section is really going to be narrative, written text, but it can also be really helpful to add in things like tables or figures or maps or drawings. Okay, like I said, you know, demographic information can be presented really nicely in a table, or maybe you have conducted some classroom observations, and important for understanding that is, understanding the use of space, or maybe that same music concert, right? It's helpful to have a map of the venue to kind of understand where people are sitting and how people are moving. Maybe drawings are important as well. So these can all absolutely go into a results chapter, but you want to use them sparingly. They should really add something. And they also have to be described in the text. So what you really want to avoid is putting a table in and not talking about it and not mentioning it. And then, again, if you're thinking about holding the reader's hand, what's the reader going to do? They're just going to skip right over it because they don't know what that table is about, or they don't know what that map means. And they definitely don't know what it means in the context of your research, right? Oh, there's a random map here. Okay. So you want to describe those as well. You can't just pop them into your chapter and think you're done. Issues of trustworthiness is another section that I often see in a results chapter. And it's another one that you probably also see in the methods chapter. And so again, in this section, this is, where you would talk about how you established trustworthiness. Okay. And if this varied at all from the proposal. So sort of the 4 tenets are credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. And so, these all have to do with, are we confident that the findings are accurate, that they are based on the participants and not the researcher? Can they be replicated? So are they sort of consistent with further replication? Are they applicable to other findings, to other contexts? So a different group of participants, a different geographical location, something like that. And so there are different ways to establish this. Triangulation is probably the one that most people are familiar with, but use of an audit trail, really detailed record and note keeping, member checking, where you might have your participants review your findings and talk to you a little bit more about, do they feel that those findings captured their experience in particular? So the way that I have these listed kind of makes it look like these are mutually exclusive, right? So for example, the triangulation can only be used to establish credibility, but that's actually not the case. So a lot of these can sort of help establish any of these key tenets. But again, the main thing is, here's where you talk about what actually happened in the course of your research. And then in the summary chapter, this is where you really highlight the key takeaways. Okay, so it's not just a recap of, I talked about this and this and this and this and this. That's not exactly what the summary is. But you want to reiterate, what's the take home message? If someone only read the summary, what would they need to know? Okay, to understand what was in that chapter, what your key findings were. So paint a picture of that. And then you'll provide a transition to the next chapter and kind of preview what's to come. So like I said at the beginning, these sections, if you're really struggling with what needs to be included in the chapter, where to get started, if you follow this, and again, default as much as possible to what your school requires or what your department requires. But if you include each of these sections, you will be in really, really, really good shape to confidently present your results. But I know that it's not always as easy as that. Okay. Some of you are here, I'm sure, because it's not even about the sections or what goes into the chapter 4. It's how the heck do I even start? And I think that one aspect that makes this chapter particularly challenging is that for a lot of us, and I went through this too, it was years between writing that proposal and actually being ready to draft my results. Okay, many years passed for me. I won't lie. Okay, I'll be perfectly honest. That's how it goes sometimes. And what happens is that we get out of the habit of writing, and we get out of the habit of sort of thinking academically. And, writing is thinking on paper. So we're out of the habit. We have our data. It's been several years. How do we get back in the habit? Right? You can wait for motivation forever, but it's not going to come. You have to go and get it. Okay. So these are my tips. They are tried and true by me. This is what I both did when I was writing my dissertation, but also what I encourage students to do as well, having been through the process. But here's sort of the real, if you came here looking for the how to just get started, here's my advice. Okay. The first is you are the boss of you, nobody else is. Okay. And what I mean by that is you don't have to start at the beginning of the chapter. You don't have to start anywhere where you don't want to start. You can start with whatever section you feel like starting with. Okay. So for some people, it's really helpful to write that introduction as kind of a roadmap prior to drafting the chapter. And if that's you, go for it. For others, it might be the case that that introduction is easier written after you have drafted the chapter and you know what's in the chapter. And if that's the case, then do that. You are the boss. You can start wherever you need to. Now, I know that you're probably also sitting there, standing there, listening to me saying, yeah, well, but when I start, it all has to be perfect. And no, it doesn't. Okay. Because I also fall into this trap as well. If I'm going to put it on paper, it has to be perfect the first time, and it does not. I'm here to tell you it does not. First, you make a mess, and then you clean up that mess. So don't worry about where you start. The important thing is that you start. Okay. You can start as small or as big as you want. Okay. If you are feeling motivated, if you're feeling good, if you're feeling like, you just had this awesome light bulb moment about one of your themes and you're just totally ready to tackle it, you're fresh, you've had your coffee, you've done whatever you needed to do, and you're going to sit down, you're going to write that section. Absolutely do it. Go for it. Okay. But if you're still kind of struggling with the where do I start, and not really feeling like doing it, but feeling like you should be doing something, go for the low-hanging fruit. Okay. This is also what I call TV work. It's the work that doesn't take up quite the same brain power that you could maybe do while you're watching your favorite sitcom or something like that. So making a table of demographic information, for example, it's relatively small. Okay. It needs to be done, but it's not going to take all of your focus. Okay. And you might think, well, that's not a lot, but you're moving toward the mountain and you have completed something. You've done something. Okay. You have something on paper. So no matter how small or big it is, you're moving toward the mountain. You have something tangible that you have completed. Okay. And oftentimes what'll happen is that you get this positive feedback loop because you've done something and it feels really good. And so you just keep going from there. But if you need to start small, start small. That is perfectly fine. The other piece of information, the other sort of task that I found really helpful when I was writing was free writing and brainstorming. And this can be done however it makes sense to you. So if you are a whiz on the computer, then do this on the computer. If you like a pencil and paper, use that. If you have a stylus and an iPad, use that. Okay, whatever is easiest for you. But free writing and brainstorming are, like I said, writing is thinking on paper. And the reason why free writing and brainstorming, I think, are so helpful is this is a no censor zone. Okay, when you are free writing, you are just writing to get words on paper. So anything related to the topic, to your topic that you're thinking about, give yourself 15 minutes. Lock yourself away from the kids. Maybe you have an office and that's awesome. Maybe you have to lock yourself, I don't know, in your bathroom with your laptop or something. That's fine too. Set a timer for 15 minutes and just write. Let yourself make grammatical errors. Let yourself mess up on spelling. Don't censor yourself. Okay. The goal is to write. And by the end of that 15 minutes, you can really get a lot accomplished. It can help with your thinking, lead to new insights about, sort of where to go and how to tackle the chapter. Some of it might be garbage. All of it might be garbage. But there are probably going to be some really good gold nuggets that are in there that I think you'll find really helpful. And so, give yourself permission to sort of not be perfect as you're working on it, and just chip away at it a little bit at a time. Okay. And I promise, you'll get there. So if you're still really struggling, that's why we're here. Okay. Again, this is Statistics Solutions. My name is Rachel. I am a senior qualitative research mentor here at Statistics Solutions, and we have mentors for qualitative research, quantitative research, for literature review, introduction, discussion chapters, you name it. We are here to help at any stage you're at in your own dissertation journey. And our goal is to provide you with timely support to help get you through the process as smoothly and quickly as possible. Okay, we take a really team-based approach. So, for example, if you are working on a qualitative dissertation, you would probably be paired with a qualitative mentor and a research mentor who would work with you on the literature review, the discussion chapter. The qualitative mentor would work with you on the research methods and the results chapter. But we provide a complimentary consultation so that we can get to know you a little bit better in your own project, your own needs, any sticking points that you have, and really how we can help out. Okay, so that information is here, info@statisticssolutions.com. You can give us a call to get that scheduled as well. Maybe the easiest way is to go to our website, which is statisticssolutions.com, and you can actually self-schedule a time that is convenient for you during our business hours to talk to someone about how we can help out. Okay. We also have, as I said at the beginning of this webinar, a ton of other free resources available to help you out on our website. So definitely check that out. We have a blog, we have blog posts about almost any topic related to the dissertation journey. But again, we're here to help if you're still struggling. This is what we do. We have all been through the process. So we know, we know what it's like, okay, writing the dissertation, and then sort of the emotional part of the journey too, right? We've been there. So again, our contact information is available here and in the chat. You will also get a copy, as I said, of this webinar tomorrow and the slides as well. So I will take questions and answers now. I've had a couple come in during the webinar, but if you do have questions, please go ahead and pop those into the question and answer box. Let's see. So the first question that I have is, what is the optimum number of cases and participants? And I really can't tell you that. It is just so highly dependent on your own study. Qualitative research, there are depending on what you're doing, there are some scholars who would say that, 6 participants might be enough. There are others who might say, 20 to 25. So the sort of the best advice that I can give you here is as you are reviewing the literature and reviewing other studies that have been conducted that are similar to your own, use those, take a look at those. How many participants did those researchers use? How many cases, if it was a case study, did those use? Question, what if the low-hanging fruit is rotten? Then I guess you're not going to be able to use it, probably. It may not be rotten, though. You might think it's rotten. I'm a big fan of getting it on paper anyway. So even if it feels like it's kind of rotten fruit, maybe go ahead and write it up anyway, because something good might come of it. You don't want to leave it out necessarily and then have to come back and go, oh, wait, maybe there was something useful in that. So yeah, I would probably still try to make something out of it. Lemons to lemonade, right? Other questions that I can answer. I don't see any more in the question and answer box, but if you do have those, please go ahead and pop them in. Are there any other questions that I can answer this afternoon? Okay. Let's see. Got a question about how many hours would be required to complete the discussion section. I'm not sure if your question is about sort of from our end, what we do here at our company. I mean, it all really can vary. It's going to depend on your design, how much data you have, what the data analysis called for, how many categories or themes there were. So it's not really it's hard to put an hour on it. So much of it really depends on on your own project. It looks like a follow-up question to that, using ANOVA. I couldn't tell you. I do the qualitative, not the quantitative, unfortunately. We do have quantitative webinars. So if you are interested in talking to one of our quantitative mentors, that would be a good place to look. You can get signed up for those on our website in the same place that you found this webinar, and they could help you out a little bit more with that. Okay, so I have a question about in writing the results, how to move away from descriptive to analytical writing. I think the key here is really, I don't know if I have a sort of a good way to put this into words. I think it might be helpful to of how you sort of analyzed and maybe, well, no, that's not, thinking of like the literature review and sort of how you analyzed other people's research. I think that might be one way to kind of help move into the analytical mode, but it's moving beyond just a description of something into the what does it mean. Okay, that's where sort of the analysis of so here's the description of an event, right? Or your participants' description of an event, but thinking about those next steps and what does that description mean? Why did they describe it in such a way? What does that mean? Why did they use the words that they use? Those kinds of things can be kind of helpful, I think, for moving, kind of shifting that. Another question. So data analysis, I don't cover here. There are different types of data analysis, and what I would recommend again is that, for your own study, as you are looking at different types of data analysis, but also, your research design, you want to make sure that your data analysis plan follows your research design. And so some designs are really flexible. And so you could use, maybe a couple of different types of analytic techniques. Some designs prescribe a particular type of analysis. So, that's going to depend. The sort of follow-up question to this is, do we have to have specific software for data analysis? And the answer is no. You can conduct data analysis by hand, using, pen and paper or highlighters and paper. Software can make this a lot easier, though, because you're still actively engaged. You're still essentially, doing the analysis by hand, but the software helps organize your data in a way that is very, very helpful. It makes it really manageable. So there are a lot of good software programs out there. It ultimately comes down to kind of what you're most comfortable with. And I always say, if your university offers you a subscription to a particular program for free or at a reduced cost, go for that one. I have another question about length of time to collect data to get accurate information. Boy, this is another one, I'm sorry, these are really, they're great questions. It's just that there's so much involved in conducting qualitative research that it's very difficult to say how long data collection might take. I have seen students fly through data collection. They've had really, they had their participants lined up. The participants had free schedules and were really cooperative. And so we're able to conduct interviews in a matter of a couple of weeks. Depending on your field, of study, it may take months or even, a year or more to collect data. So there's really a range there. Are there other questions that I can answer? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. For those who have said thank you, you're very, very welcome. This is exactly why we're here. We're here to help. We've been through it. We want to help out. So again, I'm Rachel. I'm with Statistics Solutions. You can visit our website or use any of these email, phone, our website to schedule a complimentary consultation so that we can talk to you a little bit more about your own dissertation needs. Thank you so much for spending this time with me this afternoon or evening, or maybe it's morning where you are. I wish you the best. Take care. Bye-bye.